Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for staying around, which is going to be for the hottest topic on stage this afternoon. So if you are nearby and want to come and grab a chair, please come and take the opportunity to come and listen and learn all about the co-op and the cooperative movement. So if you want to grab a seat, please do. Grab a drink, bring it over, and hopefully this will be the perfect end to your day. Stop rushing. Okay. Right, so I'm absolutely delighted that we've got 4 amazing cooperators on stage this afternoon. Well, 5, including myself, actually. I should count myself in that. And I'm going to introduce them to you, and I'm going to let them talk to you a little bit about themselves, because that's what they're here to do. But the topic this afternoon is that co-ops are popular, but no one knows what they are. So before we start, let's have a show of hands who feels they're really confident they understand what a co-op is. 1, 2. Okay. Oh, there's a few down the back. Okay. Did they put their hands up over here? Can we just... I wasn't looking this way. They know, they know. So hopefully, by the end of this session, you'll have a much better understanding of what co-ops are. And you'll learn things that you didn't even know that you didn't know. So you're going to have an interesting afternoon. So before I start, I'm going to ask our wonderful people here to introduce themselves. I'm going to go this way across, I think, probably easiest. So you've already heard from Phil today, but this is Phil Ponsonby. And Phil, do you want just to introduce yourself to this?
Yeah, sure. I'm Phil Ponsonby, Chief Exec of Mid-Counties Cooperative. I was here this morning, obviously at the AGM, talking, so I'm not going to talk too much now, but it does seem like a long time ago, actually.
That was today, wasn't it?
It was today, yes.
And we have Rose Marley. Would you like to just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, Rose?
Yeah, hi, I'm the Chief Exec of Cooperatives UK, which is the apex body for the cooperative movement in the UK. I joined Cooperatives UK just over 2 years ago now. I joined in the pandemic, and I'm on a mission to help people to understand what co-ops are and why you should all join one or start one.
Right, so that mission has already started, but this afternoon you're also part of that mission, that you all understand and feel part of that. So, and then we have Rebecca Harvey. Would you like to tell everybody a little bit about yourself, Rebecca?
Sure, thank you so much. Thank you very much for inviting me today. I'm Rebecca Harvey. I'm the Executive Editor of Co-op News, which is a magazine and news website all about cooperatives. And it's international because co-ops aren't just a mid-counties thing, they're not just a UK thing, they are an international thing. And they're not just a shop thing, they're a housing thing, they're a credit union thing, they're a farming thing. So co-ops really do have something for everybody.
They really do, and we're going to explore a little bit about that this afternoon. So, and finally we have Russell Gill. Would you like to just introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Really, really pleased to be here. My name's Russell. I'm the head of community delivery for the Co-op Group, based up in Manchester. I've worked for the Co-op for the last 30 years, wearing lots of different hats, but all in the space of kind of cooperation and cooperative difference. And the other thing that I do, which I can maybe share a little bit about today, is I look after the Co-op Academies Trust, which is one of the biggest operators of schools in the country.
Thank you. And I better tell you who I am, because you might say, who on earth is she? So my name is Vicky Green. I am a board director with Mid-Counties. I'm also on the Members' Council for Co-op Group, but in my day life, I look after inclusion in communities and within organisational culture. So that's me as well. Doesn't sound quite as exciting as what you guys described. So I'm going to kick off our session with some questions. And I have an opening question. Well, actually, I have an opening challenge for you, rather than just a question. So I think it would be really helpful for those people here today to go with a really clear message about what a co-op is compared to other business solutions, other business models. And the challenge I'm going to set you, I'm going to ask the question, and I want you imagining that you're about to tweet your reply. So you've got, what, it's a bit more now, isn't it, these days? You get more than 140 characters. But in a really quick way, if you could come up with something that actually responds to my question, so that anybody who's on social media this afternoon and wants to tweet, they can take your response and launch it into the world so that everybody else understands it too. So I'll give you a second. I'm not going to Phil first. I shall pick carefully. So I'd like you to explain in your social media post what a co-op is and how it differs from other business models. So Rose is looking quietly confident, so I'm going to start with you.
The reason I was looking quietly confident, because I spent the first year of my life at Co-ops UK trying to do exactly that. And the conclusion that I came to, because all co-ops are so uniquely different actually, so you can't just do big sweeping statements about all co-ops, apart from these two things that all co-ops do. They distribute power through their democratic ownership, and they distribute wealth through their collective ownership.
That was a pretty good start, wasn't it?
Took me a while.
I mean, really, maybe I should have gone Phil first. I'm reflecting now. No, that's a really great example. Does that make sense to everybody? Excellent, we're off to a great start. So, Russell, I'm going to come to you next. What would your definition of what a co-op is and how it differs from other business models?
Okay, I would say a co-op is a coming together of people, not a coming together of capital. So not a coming together of money.
Oh. See, that was a good one too, wasn't it? Okay. Rebecca, I'm going to come to you.
How are we going to follow that?
I know,
Okay,
just go, whatever's in your mind, just go with it.
As a member of a co-op,
Yeah.
you are an owner and get to help decide how that co-op delivers in its community and spends its money for the benefit of other members and the local area. That's a lot longer than...
That was the longest tweet, but it was really nice.
It's a thread.
No, it's fine. I like the angle you went with as a member. Okay, so Phil, back to you.
Well, firstly, apologies. I can't do short and concise, but I'm working on an average that theirs were very short, so I can see slightly longer. And I'm going to talk about a consumer cooperative. For me, lots of organisations say that their most important stakeholders are their customers. Some say it's their employees. I think what makes us truly different is that our customers and our employees are also our owners, because in most organisations, your most important stakeholders are your owners. That's who you really dance tune to. So in a cooperative, they're all one of the same, and that's what makes us different.
I think that was perfectly put. So, and I think we'll allow, I think you'd used up a few characters, but I think you came in at the end and really made that clear. So there's some really clear definitions there about what a co-op is compared to other business models. Do we all feel a bit clearer now? Excellent. Right, well, that's it, you're good. That's it. And no, we've still got some more. Right, so we're going to move on to some other questions for you. My first question is going to be for Rose, okay? So the question, Rose, is what are the views that adopting cooperative solutions are underestimated in response to the challenges in society generally and in business?
Vicky, this is my soapbox. They are so hugely underestimated with our governments, with our people. We have this really binary response in the UK to everything. So if you think about right now what's going on with the railways and the trains, for example, and you'll start, so it's in private ownership, and it's all going wrong, and everybody's now calling for national ownership. But we shouldn't just have this choice of either it's public or it's private. There is this third sector, and there is this opportunity to collectively own things and have multi-stake co-ops where the actual workers of the train companies, the governments and the councils and the people could all join together and run them way more efficiently than either of those two options. And we just don't look at it in the UK. Examples again, we've seen a lot of businesses go under, not least with the pandemic, but a brilliant example, Thomas Cook, again, it was, is it going to be rescued? Is it going to be private? Is it going to be a public buyout? Well, in Italy, you've got Macora law, and there's a right there. If that had applied in the UK, the Thomas Cook employees would have had the right to be able to try and buy the company. And not only just the rights, they could have put a claim in for future unemployment benefits to be able to capitalise the involvement of it. So there's all these solutions that you can use the cooperative model for. Look how broken our social care system is. It is so broken. And the rhetoric around that, again, is there's not enough money going into social care. Well, let me tell you about Equal Care Co-op, who are in Calderdale, who are actually paying their workers £18 to £21 an hour, and they've got really, really happy beneficiaries and customers. So it's absolutely underestimated, and it's beholden on us all to actually start shouting about the solutions that you can find through that cooperative business model, because the bit where you're not just collectively owned, but you're democratically controlled, makes a huge difference to the way an organisation runs and what it delivers, not just for the workers and the customers, but for the wealth of the local community, as Rebecca said.
I'm glad that you picked up on social care, because that was a question that was raised this morning, wasn't it, around actually how can the cooperative movement provide a solution like social care. Are there any really good examples of that you've come across in terms of providing social care in terms of the ageing population?
Yeah, absolutely. And we will be doing a session on this at Co-op Congress in Manchester on the 16th of June, because that is exactly why the co-op movement started, because things weren't fair and people were not happy with the status quo. And we should be demanding, actually, of the co-op movement to get into this space more effectively. So there's lots of different examples. We've got, examples where, private sort of care homes are owned by cooperatives, for example. We've got, let's say, the Equal Care Co-op is the one that's really potentially exciting, because the way this whole point about there's not enough money going into care, the way they've created the efficiencies is the co-op is the technology, it's the app itself. And the way they operate means that all that money for having agencies that aren't talking to each other and all the inefficiencies around that, that's where they've made the margins by using a piece of, collectively and democratically owned technology. And that's a solution. So it's something we absolutely need to be looking at.
So there's potential for massive innovation, isn't there, within this? And I think that one of the beauties of cooperative actually brings a real diversity around thinking, which actually can be quite difficult in some businesses, can't it? But cooperative, that thinking actually brings real diversity, which is where you find your best innovation, potentially.
Yeah. And it would be remiss of me not to mention Little Pioneers, because that's, again, another example of care, in terms of children and young people. And I was lucky enough to go and visit Little Pioneers, the nurseries run by your co-op here, and saw that in action. But what I was really struck by was what that meant for actually colleagues in the co-op. So again, my next door neighbours the other day were telling me that, basically if they have another child, he cannot work because the cost of the childcare means that there's just no point in him working at all, because his wife was the breadwinner and his wage would just be taken up with childcare. And that's something that really struck me with Little Pioneers, that the way that it was affecting the colleagues' ability to have their children very well looked after in a safe space that had all these incredible values, but enabled them to carry on with their working lives as well. So we've got some great examples across the whole movement.
And that's a really nice segue, actually, Phil, around you talked this morning around the bursary that is being piloted. Is there anything that you can add to that just kind of expands Rose's really good point there around actually how that model is working?
Yeah, I think I agree with Rose entirely that, in terms when you look at care, it's a really complex and difficult area, whether that's residential care, childcare. As I said this morning, they're regulated businesses areas, regulated in terms of, the controls, and you'd expect that, but also regulated in terms of funding, and funding can be a real challenge, and that in itself can create problems. And I think when we look at Little Pioneers and how it operates, we're always conscious that, you've got parents from across the economic spectrum in terms of the socioeconomics and affordability, and you've got to try and introduce flexibility in your approach. It can't be a one-size-fits-all approach. You've got to be flexible. You've got to create opportunities for parents from all backgrounds to put the children. And I visited a number of our nurseries, particularly one comes to mind up in Newcastle in the northeast, where every single child in that nursery was fully funded by the local authority. There aren't many operators that can make that work, but our team make that work, and it's so important to that community.
And that's the beauty of the cooperative model, isn't it? That flexibility and how it can be agile in its response to those social issues that so many of our owners are facing. So Phil, I have got another question for you. You'll be glad to know that wasn't your question. I'm making it up as I know. So Phil, in terms of, you talked earlier about the differences around us being owners, cooperatively owners, our members and our consumers. But what are the differences that co-ops bring to retailing for the consumer compared to others?
I think in terms of food retailing, in my experience of working with the co-op for many years, is leadership. Leadership in many areas. And I think that leadership comes from a sense of purpose, that we can always do better. And I don't think we ever rest on our laurels. We're never satisfied with what we do. We're always challenging ourselves. And I know that's the same with Russell, will echo this at the Cooperative Group, and we work very closely with the Cooperative Group. And in terms of the food policy team there, and how we want to continually improve things. I mean, the Co-op was the first to ban, testing on animals, the first to introduce fair trade products in the UK, the first to make only free-range eggs available in all the ingredients, not just free-range eggs, but in all the ingredients of all the own brand products. So leadership is really, really important. And I think we've got to be bolder, we've got to do more of it. And it's certainly a challenge for all of us, and including the Co-op Group. But I think what I've seen as a point of difference, not always, because sometimes other retailers do lead in areas, but I think typically we can be bolder and we tend to lead on some of the issues that others will shy away from.
And this is working so well, because this is a lovely segue to Rebecca. And we were challenged again this morning, weren't we, when one of our members asked us the question around how do we shout about what we do? So leadership and purpose and leading the way in these things is absolutely critical. And so Rebecca, in your world, this is perfectly for you. So you're obviously through Co-op Press around how you're really promoting and shouting about how the cooperative movement is working. How does that kind of, how do you feel that we're able to kind of really progress that messaging through the work that you do?
That's a really interesting question, because a lot of the work that we do is specifically about cooperatives. So we write for cooperators, other cooperatives, and for the international co-op movement as well. What we do as well is put everything on social media, send out press releases to other organisations as well, to try and actually make people understand that co-ops aren't just a single brand, they're a way of doing business. And that's a really, really tricky thing to do. And I'm sure Rose will talk about it shortly,
Absolutely.
but there's going to be a big push this summer during Cooperatives Fortnight to do a big push on what is a co-op. This is what a co-op is. This is why you should be excited about cooperation. So for us internally, it's about telling stories about what difference being in a co-op can make to the members, to the colleagues, to the local community. Because as Phil said, it's not just about the colleagues and the members, it's about how you use that, I'm going to say the cooperative power, to do your power for good rather than for using that power to line shareholder pockets. It's about being able to use that surplus to like you were saying, support food banks, to support all the local producers that we've seen out in the food market here. It's about making that difference and making lives better for people as well.
Excellent. So I'm being I'm adding questions in left, right and centre here. So the other question I've got for you, Rebecca, is how do co-ops support the local economy and create community wealth?
I think that there's very much two parts to this. So the local economy we've just touched on. It's about what you do with that money. So you can either send it to someone, send it to a shareholder, or you can use it to give a dividend to your members, to support local suppliers, to support local food banks, to support education and different opportunities in your local area. But the community wealth aspect is really different. So the example I've got, if you go to another retailer and buy a chocolate bar, you've bought a chocolate bar, someone will get that profit. If you go to McCounties and buy a chocolate bar, that profit will stay in the community. So that pennies, pounds, it all adds up, will be spent in the local area. So that's one way of doing it. Then if you look at what communities are, so communities can be groups of people, they can be groups of cooperatives, or they can be groups of people in a single sector, or it can be the international community. So if that chocolate bar is a fair trade chocolate bar, then you're supporting cooperatives of farmers in the international movement. So you might be supporting a cocoa cooperative in Côte d'Ivoire or in Ghana, where The daily rate for a cocoa farmer is 74 pence if you're not a fair trade cocoa farmer. If you are a fair trade cocoa farmer, you get the fair trade premium, which supports that local community by bringing the wealth back into the community and being able to develop schools, irrigation systems. And that 74p is for the male farmers. Female cocoa farmers in Côte d'Ivoire get 23p a day. So buy fair trade.
Goodness me, I mean, that's such a difference, isn't it? So actually knowing that the value and the purpose of what you've spent actually can have such a wide reach, can't it?
Absolutely, it's that small change is making a big difference. And I think it was Ben Fogel this morning saying, you don't have to change the world, you can make little steps.
Absolutely.
Making little steps can make a big difference. And if lots of people make lots of little steps, you're making big strides.
Yeah, and that's what leads to true systemic change, isn't it? If we're all able to contribute to that changing world through our income. He talked about the rowing, didn't he? That you row once and you row twice and you're getting somewhere. So, it's exactly the same thing, isn't it? So, but actually in that case, the fish in the pond are all looking after each other as well, so it's sort of, everything kind of comes together. No, thank you for that, Rebecca. So, Russell, waiting patiently. You got the yellow microphone.
I know, I sat down first to make sure I got the yellow one.
It's a very good colour for you. It's good. Right, so Russell, in your experience then, what are the differences that co-ops can bring to education and to the benefit of communities?
So I always think the best starting point for any cooperative audience is to go to the co-op principles. That's the thing that actually unites us all those co-ops around the world that Rebecca talked about. We all share those 7 principles. And Principle 5 is, yes, it's about education, but it's about the importance of education. And education was always there for the Rochdale Pioneers in terms of ensuring that everybody had an opportunity to learn and grow. But actual Principle 7 is concern for the community. And in my experience, nothing improves a community more than providing education opportunity to the people who live in that community. And that applies to the Little Pioneers. It's why it's great to have such a fantastic start in an early childhood, in a great nursery setting. It's why I'm really pleased, actually, that Co-op Group is having the opportunity to work with mid-counties and other businesses with the Royal Foundation to champion the importance of early years and just how important an early start is to cementing a great start for young people, but also cementing community. But for my experience within the Co-op academies, we know that nothing has transformed the life chances of young people in some of the most challenging communities than being able to attend a good school. Far too many young people don't get the best start in life because the schools that they attend don't give them that. And so often those are in the communities that can least afford to start with a disadvantage. And so I think actually bringing that cooperative sense of social justice, bringing the opportunity that we can bring both in terms of using our values and principles as guardrails to developing young citizens in schools, opening up the opportunity of the co-op movement and all that we bring. That brings an enormous sense of life chance to those young people who attend our academies. And I also reflect as well, this isn't just about that. When I started working with the co-op 30 years ago, I think my very first job was to play parachute games with young people in a primary school in Newmarket, teaching the importance of cooperation and working together. And I think everything that we've seen today is all about the power of people working together. So it seems to me, actually, the more we can do that as part of education, the more it will help transform society in the future.
No, it's really interesting, isn't it? And I absolutely agree that this power of people creates true purpose. And actually, I know that there'll be a lot of work that happens in Little Pioneers around actually what the cooperative movement is, and actually if they get to a co-op academy. But what's your feeling on how the cooperative solutions, maybe this is for all of you, how we really get that into our schools, into our mainstream education system? Do you feel that there is enough of that? Do you feel that there is a part that we can play in making some of this change for your...
So I definitely think that there is work to do for alternative and additional ways of doing business to become more mainstreamed within all levels of education, actually. And so I would say the answer to the question is yes, in part. But what I would say is that co-op values and principles are almost a perfect fitting for the way in which many schools and indeed many organisations want to operate naturally. So I think actually we can do better and do more on the co-op model, but we should celebrate actually that actually co-op values and a cooperative way of doing things is something that actually is a much more natural fit and is probably far more prevalent. It's just people don't realise that it's the co-op way, but it is.
And where can people find out more about, you talked about the different principles, principle number 5, that might not be something that people are aware of. Where's the best place for people to learn more about these principles?
Well, I think all cooperative societies, mid-counties included, but certainly the co-op group has, I think, got a job to keep reminding people that actually these co-op principles are the thing that makes us different and special. I think we've got a job to do as societies to do that. I think we also need to lean on organisations like Cooperatives UK and Cooperative News to tell the story, because actually it's really not that difficult to remember 7 things that set us apart and unite us with millions of people around the world. I think it's actually something that we just need to keep reminding people about.
Okay, all right, so that's something for all of us to go away and learn more about, and actually take our own responsibility for doing that, isn't there, as well? Okay, so I've got some additional questions that I wanted to ask you all, and you know, feel free to, if you feel that this is for you, you can, you know, maybe we'll have we should have got some of those paddles from earlier, shouldn't we? Like, I want this. Yeah, use your microphone. So my first question is around the cooperative movement in terms of helping to address inequalities and promote social justice. I know, Russell, you touched on social justice, but how do the rest of our panel feel that the co-op can really help address some of those inequalities? Who'd like to go? Rose,
yeah, I'll happily go. I think there's 2 very specific ways. There are co-ops like your co-op and co-op group that take issues and campaign. And, you know, so shop workers' rights being a good example most recently, so campaigning for legislation and coming together with members. You know, there's 14 million co-op members across the UK, co-op memberships. So co-ops themselves coming together campaigning for social justice is something that is a big part of the values and principles, and many, many co-ops do that. But there's also a lot of co-ops whose whole purpose is based around social justice. So the reason I jumped on the question was because we have members of the week at Co-ops UK, and this week it was a co-op called Project Tallowa. And it's a group of predominantly women that have come together, women of colour, and their whole mission is it's around black feminism and sharing experiences, sharing resources, and their remit, the reason they are set up as a community benefit society, is specifically to address structural inequalities. So I'd say there's 2 sort of significant ways of doing it, but the majority of co-ops in some form will you know, focus around social justice. I think what we need to get better at in the UK movement is bringing all our members and all our co-ops together. We could be better at dialing up a campaign across the whole movement. It tends to be a bit patchy, but it is something we're working on.
And actually, Phil, that one of the things that Rose just said around our shop workers and some of the changes that have happened. I know that Mid-County, we were part of that campaigning. Would you like to talk a little bit about that around how shop workers and the influence that Mid-County's had as part of a cooperative movement to make some real change there?
Yeah, Sam, I think there were quite a few organisations that came together to make that change, and all deserve credit. I mean, USDOR, the trade union, worked really hard in terms of the you know, Freedom from Fear campaign. I think the Association of Convenience Stores worked hard along with the cooperative movement, and I think at the root of it was that, you know, people deserve better protection and support, people that turn up to work day in, day out. And let's remind ourselves that through the pandemic, when we were all working from home, apart from our emergency services and people in the NHS and food retail shop workers, you know, they were the only other group other than the public sector groups that I mentioned that were turning up to work day in, day out at the front end, and they deserve better than to be abused by people that come into the stores. And so that campaign was a really important campaign to bring awareness politically through the system of how important it is to protect people, because they shouldn't be expected to do it as part of their job. And so I think that type of campaign is really important. And actually the way to bring it to life, and this is certainly the way this was done a lot, was actually to ask those very people to be the ones that talked to politicians, talked to government officials, rather than us trying to do it. I can turn up and having conversations, it doesn't really land. But when you ask the people that are affected by it day in, day out to do it, it has a much more powerful impact. And I think that was one of the successes of that campaign. So I think one of the things about equality as well is about accessibility. It's making sure that we find ways to give access to decision makers, to the people that it affects the most, connecting them. Because all the time we try and do it through our organisations, it tends to get stuck. So for me, it's a really important part of what we can do as a cooperative is help to connect people that are affected by inequality with the people that can make decisions and do something about it.
Yeah, and given our work, I mean, there's a piece there around that our colleagues that are out there, and you're absolutely right, the work that those colleagues did during the pandemic was incredible and deserve better, 100% agree. And I think there was something, Rebecca, you touched on earlier, wasn't there, around in that kind of whole fair trade piece as well, how workers are protected and how their voices should be heard. Have you come across any examples of where you've seen real change come through because of the workers that might be working in fair trade?
Yes, there are lots of examples in fair trade, but one I'm going to touch on, if it's okay, is not a fair trade one, but it's SEWA in India. So SEWA is a self-employed women's association, and it was set up by a woman named Ella-Ben Bhatt, who was incredible. And what she found, that in India, there was a caste of women who were shunned by the community. They were the lowest caste, they had no respect, they had no future, really. So what she did was she created a way for them to access banking. She created a way for them to access childcare, and it created a way for them to earn a wage and develop their own sense of identity and community. And over the years, she's supported over 1 billion women in India. She is absolutely incredible. She passed away a few years ago, but what SEWA has done is set up an entire community system which supports women and makes real meaningful change, taking women, or enabling women to take themselves out of poverty, out of the situation they were in, into a position where they have education, they have employment, they have respect within their own communities. It's a fantastic story, so do look them up. They're amazing.
That's amazing. Just remind us the name of that. Sorry, Phil. What was the...
It's the Self-Employed Women's Association, SEWA. Yeah.
I was just going to say very quickly, also one of our little pioneer characters is named after Ella. So one of our little pioneers characters you'll see over there is Ella, and is named after Ella.
There you go. And Russell, is there anything you'd like to add to that? Is there around our shop workers, how working in a cooperative movement really gives people a voice on how things can change for others?
I suppose I would reflect on, Phil touched on it earlier on, about the leadership position that the co-op movement as a whole has taken throughout its history, actually. And I think certainly over the last sort of 20 or 30 years, we can look at the way in which modern business has transformed following the lead that the co-op made. And I suppose I would observe that a lot of the inspiration for that leadership came from our members. It came from meetings like this. It came from occasions where people were talking about, well, perhaps there are fairer ways of doing business with the developing world. Perhaps there are better ways in which we can treat animals. It came from good old-fashioned motions and debates. So I think the seeds of those changes that have impacted modern business, not just us, which we see has been the way in which we do things, I think all come from people having stood up for something and made a change. Now, actually, interestingly enough, I've really enjoyed your AGM today. I thought it was great to hear the Mid-Counties voice of members. I've got the Co-op Group one next week. The Co-op Group AGM has got a motion on how we should be improving our animal welfare, in particular in respect of chickens. That's a great example about how our members are pushing us to go further and faster and better. And I think that shows how the cooperative model works at its best.
Absolutely, I'll be there. So I'm looking forward to it. It's a whole week of AGMs and co-opness, so there's lots going on. And this is a really nice one. I think those of us that are out there now and thinking about, actually, I want to set up a business. I want a piece of this cooperative buzz that we've all been talking about today. So what piece of advice would you give to somebody if they were looking to set up a co-op? And what resources do you think that you'd have maybe to offer, or might be just advice that you might have to help them do that? I mean, it's a fairly loaded question in terms of Rose. So I might leave you till last, actually. Let's see, and just in terms of what advice that you would each of you give, and then we'll let Rose come in and kind of do the rest of it. So what would your advice be?
I'd refer them to Rose. Really. No, I mean, I think, in all seriousness, there are great organisations like Cooperatives UK, the Plunkett Foundation, you know, Co-op Futures. They are organisations that work tirelessly to help cooperatives and social enterprise businesses start up. And so, you know, we always direct people towards them if they're looking to get involved in cooperatives. We're always there to lend a hand as well, but I think it's really helpful to work through the organisations that are set up to do that and do it very, very well.
Okay. So we're building up to something here, Rose. There's going to be a big crescendo of advice at the end. Rebecca?
I'd say talk to other co-ops. Talk to as many people as you can and have a reason about why you're setting up the co-op. It's not just going to be because you want to set up a co-op. Co-ops are there to address a reason. You know, originally in Rochdale it's because there was adulterated food. So a group of people got together, bulk buyed, gave it to the members at an affordable price. You know, that's how modern cooperation started. So what's the problem we're trying to solve? Is cooperation the right answer? And then go and talk to the people who know more about where to direct people, like the Plunkett Foundation, like Co-op Futures, and of course, yeah, like Cooperatives UK.
Okay. Thank you. Russell?
Yeah, I mean, Rebecca said it. Co-ops are about an unmet need, and it's about a group of people who share that same need, that same requirement, coming together. I think actually, you know, there are some excellent organisations who can provide advice and support. And I think ultimately when it comes to forming an enterprise, then that's definitely the right route to take. But actually the baby steps you need to take are about cooperating. And I think that's the starting point with all this. It's about working with people around you to see what the best solution is. What do you really need to address that unmet need? And hopefully that's enough thinking time for you, Rose, to give a knockout answer to this question.
Rose, it's over to you. What's the best advice?
The first thing that I'd say is not to be overwhelmed. I don't think anybody or very few people wake up one morning and say, I want to start a co-op. That isn't the starting point. That is never the starting point. The starting point is exactly what Russell and Rebecca talked about. There's normally a problem. And there's normally a group of people and they've got a problem, and it might be that their, you know, local pub is no longer sustainable, or it might be around, you know, food justice, for example, and people collectively coming together and not at that point often thinking, I want to start a business. You know, when people want to start a business, they think entrepreneurial and they think in a very different way. So like Rebecca said, talking to other co-ops, and again, at Co-ops UK, we do have, so you think you want to start or join a co-op meetings where we have them regularly online, and there's loads of resources there. It's uk.coop. But for example, you know, you can come in, it depends what stage you're at. It might just be that you're fleshing out an idea, and we've got like a whole journey and pathway. It can take people 2 or 3 years, you know, to think about something if it's not as immediate as maybe your local pub. And at that point, they've got different opportunities and offers. So for example, we have a business support program that's sponsored through the Cooperative Bank. So we can assign you advisors, we can assign you legal support, you can join sessions and talk to other people. If you think you want to start a co-op that's based on technology, like a cooperative platform, like we talked about earlier, we have an accelerator program called Unfound, where again, you can develop your business idea, you can start prototyping the technology, and you can look how to fundraise that technology. Like I say, on the website, there's loads and loads of information there, but the most important thing that we've all talked about is speaking to other people and working together with other people to find solutions, because, you know, like one size doesn't fit all. You know, all co-ops are different and they all need different types of interventions at different stages. So yeah, we've got business support programs, but the main thing is to talk to other people who've done it.
Yeah, and sometimes you find that if people feel that somebody else is going to also help them solve a problem, that's when the cooperation starts, isn't it? You know, we often say to people in communities, when we're looking at community problems, you know, things that might be happening in a very local space. And people will say, well, I don't want to get involved. It's not me. But we say to them, well, if another 3 people step forward and would want to be involved in shaping the change, would you do it then? And often the answer is yes. You know, people like to feel collaborative, don't they? They like to feel that there's a shared purpose when they're looking to resolve something.
Yeah, and what I've also observed in the co-op movement, there's plenty of cooperatives that don't want to take over the world. They don't want to grow. You know, the co-op model's not based on that kind of GDP, growth of the economy. You know, often it's a lifestyle choice for people, particularly in something like a worker co-op. So they often don't want to grow beyond, you know, the co-op that they've got. So what I've observed, a great example would be a Unicorn co-op that is a workers co-op that's, you know, a food store. They don't want to, you know, take over the country and have unicorns in, you know, every part of the country. So they'll happily give you the blueprint to do it in your area. And we've seen that with the likes of Carbon Co-op stimulating loco refit. So again, that idea of people sharing their knowledge and information is really strong in the cooperative movement. You'd be concerned if it wasn't, but people really genuinely do cooperate in the movement.
So I've got one final question for you all. I think we've had some really interesting... I love how actually you all come at things from a slightly different angle, which I think is really helpful to everybody listening. So my last question is going to be around everybody here in the room. So as they leave today, we all have a part, we've all got cooperation in our hearts. So how can citizens of the UK or the world really play a part in growing the cooperative model in terms of what we've talked about today? What one thing would you ask everyone to do as they leave the room?
Well, I'm going to ask all the co-ops to join, as Rebecca said, the Co-op Fortnight campaign, because it's called All Together Different. So the idea of being all together, the membership piece, and being different, a different way of doing business, a different way of solving problems, a different way of engaging in your work life, in where you consume. And so one of the things that I've, same as Russell, I've really enjoyed today's AGM. One of the things that I've really enjoyed is the amount of people that are here that aren't necessarily co-op members, you know, they're customers, and I really do hope you convert some to members today. But what's been great is not talking to ourselves, you know, not just having the already, you know, kind of sold on the co-op movement in the room. There's been lots of people today here that will have experienced what it means to be part of Mid-Counties Cooperative and will go on to join. So that's been really incredible. So bringing together, and they're all really different. So I would ask people to, you know, at Co-ops Fortnight, which starts on the 19th of June, to help us tell those stories. So if you've got a co-op or you're a member of a co-op, and you can talk about how you being a member or you just being a beneficiary of a co-op in some way is an altogether different way of doing business or solving a problem. We want to hear from you. We've got stories to tell. We're going to be running, as Rebecca says, a national campaign on this that's not just going to be, obviously working really closely with Co-op News, but it's not just going to be the co-op movement audience. The aim is to get this message out to the wider UK audience. So I'd ask you to all get behind Co-op Fortnight this year. So social media, hashtag Co-op Fortnight 19th of June. Please get on it.
Look out for it, folks. And I actually feel that's a really good point, isn't it, today, about today? It's normally AGMs are very much members, our owners, but today we really threw the doors open, didn't we, to our non-members, to people to learn more about us.
We did, and that's really important. We wanted to make this an accessible event and people to come along for whatever reason, and then once here to really get to understand what cooperatives and this particular co-op is all about. And you know, the single message around that is to join us, but actually the really important message, and the one message I would want people to take away, is don't be passive. You know, join us, or you may already have joined us, but join in. That's the really important thing. Get involved. This is a cooperative business, and members are involved in running it in its day-to-day. They elect the board of directors. They get involved in all sorts of ways. So the single message I would give is don't just join us, join in.
Okay. And Rebecca and Russell, is there anything you'd like to add on to the end of that?
Can I have two messages?
As long as you do them in about 13 seconds, you can do
Okay,
it. Like, no,
so-
you've got longer than that. Go on.
I guess my message to people who know what co-ops are is go and tell someone who isn't a member of co-op, I went to an AGM of a business that I am a member owner of. Just tell them and then see where that conversation goes. And then if you don't know, if this is your first experience of what co-ops are, go and read about it, go find out more about it. Have a look, what it means. And like Russell said, the co-op movement is about cooperating, the verb, not cooperatives, the noun. And it's about that working together and coming together.
Brilliant. And Russell?
Phil said it, but do business with us, but participate, be active, be engaged. That's how you'll get the most out of your membership.
That's fantastic. I love that. Join us and join in. So if you are still here and haven't joined us today in any way, then please do so. Final plug to make sure that we do that. Thank you. And I think we've had some really important kind of messages that have come out of our session this afternoon. Hopefully everybody that is here in the audience still has understood a little bit more about cooperatives. Can we just get a bit of a show of hands in terms of, do we feel that we understand more this afternoon after that session? Well, I would say that, oh, excellent. Our job is done. And I'd say that that actually is a really good outcome. And you all participating and joining in this afternoon, actually, you've been part of this. So it is about join us and join in. I think that's a new tagline. I like that. Join us, join in. I think we'll use that one. Can we just show our appreciation, please, for our panel this afternoon? So Phil, Rose, Rebecca, and Russell. I think that's been a really great session, and thank you for sharing your insight and helping us all be a little bit more cooperative. Thank you.